is Derek Siplin. I'm a student school psychologist who evaluated your nephew. Today we'll go over the results from my emotionally disturbed, specific learning disability and patterns of strength and weakness report. I like to just state that the findings from these reports are validated in, in accordance with Education Code 56320. The following was considered regarding the procedures and materials used during the present evaluation. Assessment materials were selected and administered so as not to be racially, culturally, or sexually discriminatory. Tests were administered in the student's dominant language or other modes of communication by trained qualified personnel and have been validated for specific purpose for which they are used. Tests and other assessment materials include those tailored to assess specific areas of education needs and not merely those which are designed to provide a single general intelligence quote. Tests are selected that will provide results that accurately reflect the student's aptitude and achievement and are not influenced by the student's impaired sensory, manual, or speaking skills. No single procedure is used as a sole criteria for determining whether a student is an individual of exceptional needs, and for determination an appropriate education program for the student is assessed in all areas of suspected disability. Now, throughout this report, you're going to see things like scale scores, percentiles, and composite scores. Scale scores is just what Cole scored on an individual test, subtest, within a cluster of assessments. And when it comes to the percentiles, that's simply where Cole lands compared to his peers in his same age group across the world, nation. And the composite scores is the reliability of the actual scores. Um, so we have the validness and the reliability coming into factor. And the first assessment was the Wisher Intelligence Scale for Children, 5th edition, also known as the WIS-5. During his observation, during assessing Cole, he was able to follow directions by the assessor and answer questions in an appropriate time. As the assessment progressed, Cole sighed frequently and placed his hands on his face. Cole hesitated before answering on several questions. Cole rubbed his hands often during the assessment when hesitating to answer questions and crossed his arms during the assessment process. When Cole was unsure of an answer, he verbally expressed how he did not know the answer. Now, as I stated, the WIS focuses on a broad ability, and it has 7 different subtests, or seven broad abilities. One is the crystallized intelligence, the other is fluid intelligence, then we have visual processing, then we have long-term storage and retrieval, we have short-term memory, and we have processing speed, and we have auditory processing. Now, for Cole specifically, he landed in the average range, 5 out of the 7 broad abilities. The 2 below average range was the processing speed and the auditory processing. And what that actually focuses on for auditory processing, it focuses on the ability to detect and process meaningful nonverbal information and sounds. So an example would be listen to words with missing letters and saying the correct word, hearing things like olipop and saying lollipop. For processing speed, a weakness in this area can appear in the classroom as difficulties processing information rapidly or completing assignments within time limits, taking time tests, making rapid comparisons between and among bits of information, copying. As you can see here, here are the strengths that Cole showed during the WIS-5 assessment, and here are his weaknesses. Basically, Cole exhibited cognitive strengths and 2 cognitive weaknesses. His academic skills are developed and represented by the standardized assessment, but he does have 2 weaknesses that show evidence of a specific learning disability due to just having 2 cognitive weaknesses. It appears he lacks in knowledge along with not producing the work in the classroom setting. Here is Cole's current grades as proof that he's not producing in the classroom. Next findings focused on the Whistler Individualist Achievement Test, third edition. These assessment focused on basic reading skills, which Cole was average, reading decoding, which he was average again, reading comprehension, which he was average. For reading fluency, this is where we see that he was below average. For written expressions, we can see he's below average again. For math calculations, we can see that he's below average again. Math problems, he's below average. Oral expressions, he's below average. Listening comprehension, he was in the average. So as you can see, for Cole, his overall broad ability, cognitive skills, he had several strengths and a few weaknesses. But when it came to the achievement test, you can see here that reading fluency was a problem. Writing was a problem. Math was a problem. Speaking was a problem. So far, it does look like Cole qualifies for SLD eligibility. We wanted to continue to look even further, and we wanted to assess his emotional to see if he was eligible for emotional disturbance. That criteria is listed right here, as you can see. Requires that individuals exhibit one or more of 5 characters listed below. And furthermore, the characteristics must meet 3 limiting criteria. It must have existed over a long period of time, must be marked a degree, must adversely affect the individual's educational performance, behaviors consistent with the emotional disturbance, must be evidenced across environments. 6 criteria for emotional disturbance are listed below. And I'll go over this when we get to the eligibility and if he qualifies. As you can see, those are the criteria. So we went ahead and performed another assessment, the behavior assessment system for children 3. There's a teacher rating scale, there's a parent rating scale. So as you can see here, I have a graph for clinical skills, standard type, and adaptive skills. We're looking for anything in the clinical significant range. That's what would stand out most to us. So scores in the at-risk range identify a significant problem. Any scores in the clinically significant range suggest a high level of maladjustment. Behavior symptom index is an overall composite score of all scales. The teachers and the guardian scores are listed below. So here goes your scores right here, and here goes Mr. Charge, his teacher's scores right here. We can see several clinically significant in the anxiety and depression section for both parties. And then awful behavior symptom indexes for both parties. Yes. So we're going to focus on the clinically significant, and I can see here in your rating scale, it looks like behavior symptoms, adaptability, withdrawal, internalization problems, anxiety, summarization, and depression. It appears Coles tends to internalize stressors more than his same age peers who may negatively impact him academically. Once again, for his teacher, and typically a tendency to engage in behavior that is odd or immature when compared to his same age peers, somatization, a tendency to be overly sensitive to minor physical problems, depression, anxiety, hyperactivity, internalizing problems, atypicality, behavior symptoms, index, school problems, attention problems, and learning problems. Very, very similar to what you scored on your rating scale. I'll show you another graph here. We got the clinical scales right here, and we have the ranges, and then we have the description. As you can see, clinically significant for emotional self-control for both parties. We're at high risk for negative emotions, clinically significant for negative emotions on the teacher side. I have another graph here in regards to the teacher side of the assessment. Attitude in school, clinically significant. As we can see here again, locus of control, self-stress, anxiety, depression, internalized problems. These are all consistent from your rating scale and the teacher's rating scale. That Cole is just not measuring up to his same peer age group when it comes to these type of things. We have another one here, a tendency to develop physical symptoms of fears associated with personal or school problems. Cole scored a bit on the BAS-3 parent and teacher measuring summarization. We're in the clinically significant range on the SAD-2. Responses measuring physical symptoms or fears were in the high indicative of the ED range from his teacher and guardian. This criteria is met to be marked degree and reported by his mother or guardian for a period of 6 months, which may be impacting his school. So as you can see, Cole met 2 of those criteria, and right here it says requires the individual to exhibit 1 or more of the 5 characteristics. So Cole met 2, so therefore he's eligible um, for emotionally disturbed. Um, well, let's say he has the characteristics of someone who's eligible for ED or meets the criteria for ED. So just going over the specific learning disability criteria, it definitely says that it needs to be a severe discrepancy between intellectual ability and achievement in 1 or more of the 7 basic academic areas. We do know that Cole had 2 weaknesses for his broad ability. But when it came to the Wyatt, he had several weaknesses. Whether these were severe discrepancy or just slightly below average is something that can be further looked into. But for the other assessment, it was clear. Written expression, reading fluency, math calculation, oral expression were all struggles for Cole and was in the below average range for all of the subtests involved. These are all composite scores. Um, so you can see the number right here, that is composite. Real quick, I want to show you this bell curve right here. So we can see for his broad ability, Cole was landing right in this range for 5 of those subtests, and was landing in this range for about 2 of the other ones. For the other assessment we gave on basic reading and reading fluency, a lot of his scores were in this range, in the low range. Not quite deficit, but close to deficit, as it was in the 70s in this range. So you can see that he was only better than relatively 2.2% of the students his age, his peers around the world. So in conclusion, I just found that these findings indicated educationally related mental health services would be appropriate to support Cole to address his internal coping skills related to depression. I think it's recommended that the IEP team work together to develop the counseling goal for this area. Recommendations is just offer positive encouragement, adjust seat arrangements in classroom, moving student closer, and consider attending strength and family programs offered from FCUSD families coming up in the fall of 2021. Also, to consider our recommendations from the IEP team members. So anything that they have, definitely want to consider that. So the final decision as to whether Cole meets special education eligibility will be made by the individualized education program team, including assessments, personnel, and will consider all relevant materials which is available on COLE. No single score or product of scores, tests, or procedures has been used as a sole criteria for this decision of the individualized education plan team as to the eligibility for special education. So that concludes my report. Any questions? Do you have any questions? Anything I can clarify? I can definitely show this graph again, and we can go pinpoint where he lands at on the scale